Hi there, this is Paige with Stamp Girl here on YouTube, and welcome to my channel. In this video I'm sharing with you the cards I made for the Craft Our Paper Stash June edition, and we post around five cards, sometimes more, sometimes less, on the 15th of each month. And this collab is hosted by Deb Hauk from Deb Hauk's Crafty Cottage here on YouTube. So for this month I pulled out some designer paper from Stampin' Up! Called Ornate Garden. And these are the prints that I used. This kind of reminds me of a Mary Engelbrett pattern. It's one of my favorites. I did use some from the back side. I used some of this paper right here that is just gorgeous. And also from the back side. I used a little bit of this one, and also the back side. Along with that, I pulled out the stamp sets that went with this sweet ornate style, where I used this stamp a couple of times. I used this stamp, and I used a couple of these little ones. I used You're Amazing and Just Wanted to Say. I also pulled out Gather Together and used So Glad to Have You in My Life. And then I used the dies that coordinate with that suite. And so one of them is called the Ornate Layers dies. And I think I have my pieces a little bit mixed up here. Must be these. I thought it was something different. Anyway, I used this die right here. And then from the Poppy Parade suite, I used a couple of different dies. I used this one, and I used these two label dies. And then also from the Ornate Garden suite, I used this 3D embossing folder called Ornate Floral. Now, what I did was I pulled out the newest Stampin' Up! Catalog. It just became current on the 3rd of the month, and I was going through it looking for card samples. And so on page number 1, I copied a couple of cards from this page. And one of the cards I copied was this one right here. I did mine in terracotta tile, but I did it very similar. So I have the card base the same where a portion was cut away. I have the panel of embossed ornate floral, and then I have that ornate frame, and a portion of the larger flower stamped in terracotta tile. Mine is on very vanilla. And then the sentiment, You're Amazing, I embellished with some faceted dots from last year's catalog in the in colors. And then the inside I have a plain panel to write on. And I cut it so that it wouldn't show through from the front of the card. So that's my card number 1. Card number 2, I copied this one. And I used the paper that reminds me of Mary Engelbrett. I cut a panel and then cut away a portion, a diagonal portion. I cut the same shape out of craft foam and put it behind so that it would pop up. I stamped Just Wanted to Say in that little space. And this is some borderline stickers that I had in my stash. The pale green went nicely with the pale green of the leaves. And then I just used some glittery enamel dots from Stampin' Up! Also in pale green. And then the inside I used another piece of the pattern paper, and on the white cardstock I just mimicked that diagonal with a scrap of the borderline sticker. So right off the bat, 2 cards from page number 1 in the catalog. The next card that I was inspired by was on page 11, and that would be this card right here. So I used 3 different strips of pattern paper. Where they stitched theirs, I used some borderline stickers on the edge of the green. And then I used a similar die shape that they had, and that was from the Poppy Parade die set. I stamped it in terracotta tile. I only colored the leaves and stems and centers of the flowers with blends. And then I also used from Poppy Parade this piece right here. And then I went over these flowers with Wink Estella and embellished with the faceted gems from last year. And then the inside is a white panel, a scrap of the green, and then another borderline sticker. From this card, I made another card, and that was this one right here. So this piece was die cut from this panel, was the portion of flowers that was right there, went onto that card. And did I mention I die cut the same shape from foam to pop this up? So then from this back layer, I die cut this shape and this shape, and then just use the scraps and put white cardstock over it. And then I inset that terracotta tile panel, and then I used the smaller die from the Poppy set for the sentiment. And I don't have the stamp set out any longer of what I used for the sentiment, but here is the smaller flower that I used from Ornate Garden, or Ornate Style, I guess it's called. Then I used some older in-color enamel dots from Stampin' Up! I believe this is Grapefruit Grove, but it went nicely with the terracotta tile. And a simple inside. So I was really pleased how I was able to take one card part and turn it into 2 cards that are totally different. And then my final card that I was inspired by was page 43. And that was this card right here. So I made mine going vertical. What inspired me was this die cut piece right here. I had pulled out this piece. It came in a package. It was from David to Tara. I think that's his name. Anyway, there were these pieces. They were gifted to me quite a while ago, and so I've always had them in the back of my mind to use them. I pulled them out several times and then put them back because I wasn't quite sure how to use it. This dark brown piece was also in a package of card fronts from David to Tara, and so I just put them together. They seemed to fit really nicely, although they were sold in separate packages. I cut a piece of the pattern paper to fit behind this grid right here, and then I glued that to this darker brown frame, which is also it's textured cardstock, but it's also embossed with polka dots. It came that way. And there was an oval piece that punched out from this dark brown piece that's behind the pattern paper. But it reminded me of this. And so then I just took a label from an old paper pumpkin kit, stamped it with "So Glad to Have You in My Life." I took some gold metallic thread and wound it around my fingers several times and squeezed it together in the middle and attached it with some glue dots. And then this is popped up with dimensionals. Then I took some gold glitter dots and put them in the 4 corners, and 3 of them up here in the centers of these flowers, and 1 in the center of that flower down there. And then the inside of this card is just blank. So those are my 5 cards. inspired by, cased by the new Stampin' Up! Catalog. So be sure and use your catalogs to get some card ideas. Change the colors, let it draw attention to things you already have in your stash to use another way. And you can create some cards that are similar but also very different, and you make them your own. I'd like to thank you for joining me. Down below will be a link to all the participants in this collaboration. And now I'm off to create.